Welcome to The Ordinary Effect. I am your host, Guido Perino. Thank you for joining me today. I hope that you are a subscriber, and if you're not, please consider subscribing. This is the place where I talk about the things that maybe we all notice, but we don't all talk about. And this week, I'd like to talk about why it feels harder to tell where Canada is headed. You see, most Canadians don't experience the country through speeches, policies, or headlines. They experience it through moments that feel small at the time, but accumulate into something heavier. Standing in a grocery store doing mental math, watching a housing listing disappear before they even consider calling, waiting months for an appointment that used to take weeks, hearing about global conflicts, trade tensions, economic forecasts, and wondering how much of that will quietly land in their own lives. And underneath all of those moments is a question that doesn't sound political, but really is. Are things getting better, worse, or just harder to understand? A survey of more than 4,000 Canadians reported by the Epoch Times tried to capture that feeling directly. Not ideology, not party loyalty, just mood. 43% said they're optimistic about Canada's near future. 31% said the country is headed in the wrong direction. The rest were unsure, doubtful that much would improve, or simply didn't know. That distribution doesn't sound like confidence, but it also doesn't sound like collapse. It sounds like people trying to orient themselves at the same time, each using their own experiences as a compass. When life feels predictable, direction feels obvious. When predictability disappears, direction becomes harder to judge. You can hear that uncertainty in everyday conversations. One person says the country is declining. Another says it's just a rough patch. Someone else says they've stopped trying to figure it out because it changes too quickly. What's striking isn't disagreement, it's the absence of certainty. When Canadians were asked what the federal government should focus on, the answers weren't abstract. The economy, healthcare wait times, cost of living, housing affordability. These are not ideological battlegrounds. They're stress points in ordinary lives. People aren't asking for a new national vision. They're asking for stability in the systems that determine whether daily life feels manageable. At the same time, about 4 in 10 Canadians say they're financially worse off than a year ago. That's not just data. That's the experience of opening bills with a different mindset than before. It's the hesitation before committing to anything long term because the future feels less predictable than it used to. It's the quiet awareness that even if nothing catastrophic has happened, the margin for error has shrunk. What makes this moment confusing is that strain exists alongside cautious optimism. People can feel squeezed and still believe the country itself isn't doomed. That combination isn't contradictory. It's historically Canadian. We worry intensely about the present while maintaining a long-term belief that the system will somehow hold. Canada has gone through moments like this before, though they rarely look identical in hindsight. In the late 1980s, the debate over free trade with the United States felt like a turning point that could reshape the country permanently. Many feared economic dependence, job losses, and cultural erosion. The anxiety wasn't theoretical. It touched livelihoods and identity. Today, that trade relationship is so embedded that it's difficult to imagine the economy without it. Although we've had to. What once felt like a leap into uncertainty became a pillar of stability until it didn't, and Canada, had to pivot again. And they are. We are. The early 1990s brought a different kind of tension. The introduction of the GST triggered protests across the country because people felt squeezed and unheard. Costs were rising. Trust was fragile. And the policy symbolized a government out of touch with everyday realities. Over time, the outrage faded into routine frustration. The pressure at the time felt overwhelming. The long-term effect became normalized. Then came the 1995 Quebec referendum, when the future of the country itself felt uncertain. For a brief period, it wasn't clear whether Canada would remain intact. Businesses hesitated, families argued, and the emotional weight was palpable. The country didn't fracture. The tension eased and life continued, though the memory of that uncertainty lingered. Sometimes it still does. The global financial crisis of 2008 produced yet another wave of anxiety. Job insecurity, housing fears, retirement doubts. Canadians watched events unfolding elsewhere and wondered how much damage would reach them. The recovery wasn't smooth or equal, but the system didn't collapse. It adjusted. None of those moments felt calm when they were happening. They felt disorienting, tense, unpredictable, much like now. What changed wasn't just economic conditions or political decisions, it was perspective. Time transformed uncertainty into context. Today's uncertainty has a different layer because it isn't only domestic. The global environment is shifting in ways that touch Canada indirectly but persistently. The relationship with the United States, historically Canada's largest trading partner and economic anchor, had remained strong for a long time. Now it no longer feels like the only axis of stability. Diversification has become important. Trade diversification toward Europe, Asia, and other regions is expanding, introducing new opportunities and, understandably, new uncertainties at the same time. There was a time when expanding trade with the United States itself felt risky. Now, equally, expanding beyond the United States also feels risky. The pattern is familiar, even if the direction has changed. Diversification isn't abandonment. It's an attempt to reduce dependence on any single partner in a world where alliances and supply chains are less predictable. For ordinary Canadians, those shifts show up in subtle ways. Job markets, prices, availability of goods, the sense that global events are closer than they used to be. Debates about government spending reflect the same tension between caution and necessity. Large investments promise solutions to housing shortages, infrastructure needs, and national priorities. But they also raise concerns about debt and long-term stability. Most Canadians aren't ideologically committed to either side. They want action that doesn't create new instability later. When asked about the role of government, a strong majority said it should focus on core responsibilities rather than expanding into many areas. That response reveals a desire for competence over ideology. People want systems that function, healthcare when they need it, infrastructure that works, rules that are predictable. Stability isn't about size, it's about reliability. Trust complicates that picture. Many Canadians feel media coverage of national issues is biased or incomplete, which makes it harder to form a shared understanding of what's happening. Without common reference points, perception fragments. One person sees crisis, another sees exaggeration. A third disengages entirely. The result is a country experiencing the same events through different emotional filters. What all of this produces isn't panic or confidence, but something in between. A sense that the ground is shifting slowly in ways that are difficult to map. Canada's history suggests that this kind of adjustment is not unusual. The country rarely moves through dramatic transformation. It moves through prolonged recalibration, absorbing pressures until a new balance emerges. Balance doesn't feel stable when you're living through it. It feels like everything is in motion at once, like familiar landmarks are slightly out of place. Only afterward does it look like continuity. So, when people ask whether Canada is moving in the right direction, they may be really asking whether stability will return to their own lives, whether the systems they depend on will become predictable again, whether planning will feel safer, whether the future will feel less opaque. The survey doesn't provide certainty because certainty isn't available right now. What it shows is that Canadians are experiencing uncertainty together, even if they interpret it differently. Optimism hasn't disappeared. Concern hasn't overwhelmed everything else. The country isn't united in confidence or despair. It's suspended between them. That suspension can feel unsettling, but it may also be evidence of resilience. A society that continues to debate, question, and adjust hasn't given up on itself. It's searching for a balance that fits new realities. Canada may not feel steady in the way it once did, but it hasn't lost its capacity to steady itself. The direction may not be obvious in the moment, but direction rarely is when you're inside the process of change. What many Canadians are experiencing right now isn't clarity or collapse. It's the uneasy middle where optimism and anxiety coexist, where the past no longer feels like a reliable guide, but the future hasn't revealed itself yet. And sometimes that uneasy middle is not a sign that a country is lost. It's the space where it quietly figures out where to go next. Thank you for joining me on The Ordinary Effect. I hope that if you're not a subscriber, you subscribe. Take care, and hope you're here next week.